Today we are going to discuss about some other amendments in GST. So the next amendment which we are going to talk about is the enhancing or increasing of the threshold limit which is required for the purpose of registration. So this had previously come in the form of a notification, and now this has been inserted as a second proviso to section 22 subsection 1. So there's an enhancement of the threshold limit for the purpose of registration, and this is specifically applicable to people who are engaged exclusively in supply of goods, and the threshold limit which is applicable to people who are exclusively engaged in supply of goods is rupees 40 lakhs, which means that for in normal situations we have seen it is either 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs, and now there's one more condition which has come up, and that is specifically related to people who are engaged in supply of goods, and they'll be required to get registered once their turnover crosses rupees 40 lakhs. Now here one very important point which has to be understood is that this threshold limit of 40 lakhs is applicable in some states, and there are some states wherein this threshold limit of 40 lakh is not applicable. And one more important point about this is threshold limit of 40 lakhs is applicable only to people who are engaged exclusively in supply of goods. So if a person is engaged in supply of service, then he cannot take the benefit of this increased threshold limit of rupees 40 lakh. It is only a person who is exclusively engaged in supply of goods who can take the benefit of this threshold limit. But yes, there's one major relaxation which has been given. Now the relaxation which has been given is that if a person is exclusively engaged in supply of goods, but apart from supplying goods he is engaged in supply of service. And what type of service? The service is by way of lending, extending deposits, giving loans or advances, wherein the consideration which he'll receive will be in the form of interest or discount. So say for example there's a person who is selling electronic goods. Now apart from selling electronic goods, he is also engaged in lending money. He is also giving loans to people, and in return he is getting interest on the loans which he is giving. So like we've all seen that services provided by way of extending deposits or loans wherein the consideration is in the form of interest or discount is exempt supply of service. So if a person is engaged in an exempt supply of service, and which is in the form of extending deposits or giving loans etc., wherein the consideration would be in the form of interest or discount, then if this is being done along with some exclusive supply of goods, then it would be considered as an exclusive supply of goods. So please understand, let us continue the previous example only. A person is engaged in supply of electronic goods, and along with that he is also lending some amount into lending business, then in that situation it will be treated as exclusive supply of goods for the purpose of section 22. But say for example a person is engaged in supply of goods and electronic goods, and along with supply of electronic goods he is doing some other service, he is also engaged in supply of some other service, then in that situation it wouldn't be treated as exclusive supply of goods. So please understand that relaxation is given only and only for the purpose of extending deposits and loans, only with respect to one service, and that is by way of extending deposits and loans which are exempt supply of service, wherein the consideration is in the form of interest or discount. So this is one important point which has to be remembered. Now moving ahead to other thing which has come up, and that is Aadhaar authentication. So Aadhaar authentication is one mandatory thing which has come up. And what does this Aadhaar authentication say? Now first let's look at at Aadhaar authentication from the point of view of a registered person, and then we'll talk about different categories of person. So it is mandatory for every registered person to undergo authentication, Aadhaar authentication, or he has to give a proof of his Aadhaar number, that he has this Aadhaar number, and this has to be given to the authorities in the manner which has been prescribed as per the rules. Whatever has been prescribed, it has to be done as per that. But say a person does not have an Aadhaar number, or he's not been assigned with some Aadhaar number for some reason, then he shall say it is a situation wherein a person is not assigned with any Aadhaar number. Then in that situation he shall be offered an alternate and viable means of identification by the government. मतलब डिपार्टमेंट उनको बताएगा कि आधार नंबर अगर आपके पास नहीं है, if you do not have an Aadhaar number assigned to you, then in that situation you may use this alternate means or this means of identification which is being given by the government. So first and foremost requirement is that a person should be in possession of Aadhaar number. He has to undergo Aadhaar authentication and he has to give a proof of the Aadhaar number which he has. In a situation wherein he has not been assigned with any Aadhaar number, then he has to see what is the alternate which is being offered, what is the alternate and viable means of identification which is given by the government, and this will be done obviously on the recommendation of the GST Council. So this has to be seen by the person. And in a situation wherein a person is not able to authenticate his Aadhaar number, or he is not able to furnish any alternate and viable means of identification also which has been prescribed, then in that situation the registration which was allotted to that person previously will be deemed to be invalid. The registration will be revoked, and all the provisions which are applicable to an unregistered person will be applied to this particular person. So please understand that here we are talking from the point of view of a registered person. A person was a registered person and he fails to get Aadhaar authentication done. He does not have Aadhaar number, and also he is not able to do the authentication by using the other alternate means and other viable means of identification which is being given by the government. Then in that situation the registration which was previously granted to this person shall be deemed to be invalid. It will be revoked and he will be treated as an unregistered person, and whatever provisions are applicable to an unregistered person will be applied to this person now. So this was from the point of view of a person who is already registered. Now let's talk. Now say there's a person who is an individual and he wants to obtain GST registration. So in that situation as well, this person, he has to furnish a proof of his Aadhaar number, or in a situation he does not have Aadhaar number, he'll have to use the alternate and viable means of identification which has been prescribed by the government. And in case he is not able to do either of the things, then he will not be granted with any registration. Now this was with respect to an individual, but there could be a situation wherein a firm or a company or HUF, they want to get registered under GST. So a company cannot have Aadhaar number, या फिर एक firm के पास Aadhaar number नहीं हो सकता है. Then in that situation, who would be the person, or how would Aadhaar authentication happen? So in that situations, company में there are authorized signatories. In a firm there's authorized signatory, there's managing partner or authorized partners who takes care of all the things. And when we are talking about HUF, then the Aadhaar number of the Karta will be used for the purpose of Aadhaar authentication. So Aadhaar authentication has to be done in case of HUF, firm, as well as a company also. So in case of HUF, the Aadhaar authentication will be done with the help of the Karta's Aadhaar number. In case of a firm, it has to be done by the managing partners or the authorized signatories Aadhaar number, and similarly in case of a company as well, it has to be done using the Aadhaar number of the authorized signatory. So please understand, Aadhaar authentication is not only a thing which is required in case of an individual, but this is a thing which has to be done with respect to the other categories as well. So now let's look at to which persons this provision is not applicable. So this particular provision will not apply to a person who is not a citizen of India. Like you all know that Aadhaar number is something which will be given to a citizen of India. So the provision will not apply to a person who is not a citizen of India, or person other than an individual authorized signatory of any firm or company, etc., or managing or authorized partners, and Karta of HUF. So, in short, this provision is applicable to individuals, it is applicable to companies, it is applicable to firms, it is applicable to HUFs, and all the authorized signatories of these particular entities. But yes, this provision is not applicable to a person who is not a citizen of India and a person other than the four categories which have already been mentioned. So, in a situation, a person fails to undergo any Aadhaar authentication, then registration can be granted to that person only after physical verification is done. So please understand, in case of GST, usually physical verification is something which takes place only after a certain time span or after the registration happens. But here in the situation wherein Aadhaar authentication is not done, in that situation the registration will be granted only after the physical verification of the principal place of business is done. And for physical verification, obviously this person has to make an application that I do not have this Aadhaar number, so you can please come and physically verify my place of business, and then you can grant me registration. So where a person he fails to undergo Aadhaar authentication, then the registration will be granted to him only after a physical verification is done of his principal place of business, and this physical verification has to be done within 60 days from the date when he has applied for it. So within 60 days from the date of application, the physical verification of his premises, the physical verification of his place of business has to be carried out. Now there's another small change, and that is in rule 10A. So here there's an option which has been given. So a registered person has got an option to give his bank account details after obtaining registration, but yes, he has to do this within 45 days from the grant of registration or the due date of furnishing of return, whichever is earlier. So there's this option which has been given कि आप अपने बैंक अकाउंट डिटेल्स जो है आप बाद में भी दे सकते हो आफ्टर रिसीविंग योर रजिस्ट्रेशन, बट येस देयर इज अ टाइम लिमिट टू इट, and the time limit which has been given is 45 days from the grant of registration or the due date of furnishing return, whichever is earlier. And if there is any violation of this rule, then the GST registration will be cancelled. The registration which was earlier given will be cancelled. Moving ahead to another point, as you all know, a registered person has an option to issue a consolidated tax invoice wherein the supply of goods or services less than 200 and the recipient is unregistered and he does not want a tax invoice. So this is this is an option which a registered person has, but yes, this option is not eligible to a supplier who is making supply of service by way of admission to exhibition of cinematograph films in multiplex screen. So basically multiplexes में अगर आप चाह रहे हो और आप अनरजिस्टर्ड हो और आपका टिकट का कॉस्ट 200 के नीचे है, तो ऐसा नहीं हो सकता कि वो आपको बिल ना दे या इनवॉइस ना दे. द इनवॉइस हैज़ टू बी गिवन. Moving ahead to another section, section 31A. Now what has happened here is, here's an option which has been given, and this option is basically for the benefit of the recipients. We'll first have a look at what section 31A is, and then we'll move ahead. So the government may, on recommendation of the council, may prescribe a class of registered person who shall provide prescribed modes of electronic payment to the recipient and give option to such recipient to make payment accordingly as may be prescribed. So basically यहाँ पे क्या है, यहाँ पे the government they have given or they have prescribed a class of registered person who has to give an option to the recipient of good or the recipient of service to make the payment electronically, to make the payment digitally. Usually what would happen basically is there could be a situation wherein, say you are a registered person, you are a registered supplier and you are supplying some goods to your recipient, and आप उनको बोलते हो कि नहीं मुझे पेमेंट कैश में ही चाहिए, I do not want the payment through electronic means, I do not want a digital payment, I want a cash payment. But there could be a situation wherein the recipient would not want to do a cash payment, but he would have to do it because you did not accept any electronic mode of payment. So यहाँ पे the government, it has come up with this particular change, and therein they have said that you will have to give an option to your recipient to make payment through electronic means as well, and it is up to the recipient that how he has to make the payment, whether he has to make the payment in cash or whether he has to make the payment electronically. So the supplier has to give an option to the recipient to make payment digitally as well. So this is one very important change, I would say, which has come up. Now the other change which we'll talk about now is restriction on furnishing of information in part A of form GST EWB01. So this is basically with respect to e-way bill. So part A may we usually give details of the consignor, consignee, etc. So what does this change say? So this particularly says that no person, and this is including a consignor, consignee, transporter, e-commerce operator or a courier agency. So no person shall be allowed to furnish information in part A of form GST EWB01 in respect of the following registered persons, whether as a supplier or as a recipient. So basically these people will not be allowed to give information in part A of GST EWB01 in case whether as a supplier or as a recipient, if they have made a default in filing the GST returns. So who are the categories of person? It could be a person who is paying tax under composition scheme and he has not furnished the statement for payment of self-assessed tax for 2 consecutive quarters. So in a situation, a person who is a composition dealer and he is not furnished his statement of payment for 2 consecutive quarters, whether as a supplier or as a recipient, he will not be allowed to give information in part A of form GST EWB01. Or it could be a person who is a regular dealer who is paying tax under regular scheme and he is not furnished returns for 2 consecutive months, and return here is GSTR 3B. So if a person who is paying tax under regular scheme and he is not furnishing returns for 2 consecutive months, then again he will not be allowed to furnish information in part A. The next category is a person who is a regular dealer and he is not furnished GSTR1 for any 2 consecutive months or quarters as the case may be. So in a situation a person fails to file his return for 2 consecutive months or 2 consecutive quarters, then in that situation this person will not be allowed. अगर सप्लायर कर रहा है तो भी अलाउड नहीं होगा, अगर रेसिपेंट कर रहा है तो भी अलाउड नहीं होगा. सो इवन इफ द डिफॉल्ट इज मेड बाय द सप्लायर और द रेसिपेंट, एनी पर्सन विल नॉट बी अलाउड टू file information in part A, and even if it is the recipient's default, the other persons will not be allowed to furnish information in part A. So but in a situation, say the person who has made this default, they have a genuine reason for this default, or there's a genuine reason because of which they could not file the return, and they apply to the commissioner that this was the reason why we couldn't file the return. What was the if they are able to give sufficient cause of why the return was not furnished, and this has to be in writing, then in that situation the commissioner, if he is satisfied with the written explanation or the cause which has been showed by the person, then he may allow this person to furnish information in part A subject to certain conditions and restrictions. So basically आप रिक्वेस्ट कर सकते हो, whoever has made the default, that person may make a request to the commissioner, and the commissioner does not have this outright uh, power to reject the request before giving an opportunity of being heard. So the commissioner should listen to the person's cause which he is giving. He has to listen to the reasons which is being given by the persons for the default. Say it could be a reason, say floods aa gaye, internet connection down ho gaya, because of the floods the situation in the area was such that you couldn't file the returns. It could be any reason, but the reason has to be a genuine reason. There should be sufficient cause for non-filing, and if the commissioner is satisfied with the reasons which you are giving, then he may allow you to file the information in part A of GST EWB 01, but yes, subject to the conditions and restrictions. Now another change which we'll talk about is transfer of amount from one head to another. So section 49 subsection 10 talks about this. So a registered person may on the common portal transfer any amount of tax, interest, penalty or fee or any other amount which is available in the electronic cash ledger. So please understand that transfer can be done only in the electronic cash ledger to the electronic cash ledger for integrated tax, central tax, state tax or union territory tax or cess, and this transfer has to be done in the manner which has been prescribed subject to the conditions and restrictions which are given. Now say for example, as you all know, in the electronic cash ledger there would be four major heads, that is CGST, SDST, IGST, UTGST, and apart from that there would be subheads that would be tax, interest, penalty, fee. So tax would be one head, interest another, penalty another one, and fee another one. So there would be some major heads and the minor heads. Major heads would be CGST, SDST, IGST, UTGST, and the minor heads would be penalty, interest, fee, etc. So here in this, here what section 4910 says is, so the amount can be transferred from tax which is available in one head. Say CGST का थोड़ा tax amount है आपके electronic cash ledger में, say 1 lakh, and there's IGST liability which you have of say 1 lakh. So now there's amount in your CGST tax head and you have to pay IGST tax and not CGST tax because your output tax liability is in the form of IGST of 1 lakh. So now the CGST tax amount of 1 lakh can be transferred to IGST tax amount. तो वो 1 lakh जो होगा वो IGST tax amount में transfer हो जाएगा, and this would be done in the electronic cash ledger. But please understand that say you have CGST tax of 1 lakh and you have to pay IGST interest of say 5,000. So this kind of transfer cannot happen. Tax has to be transferred into tax only. It cannot be transferred as interest to the other head. So understand, there can be transferred from a major to major head only and from a minor to minor head only. There cannot be a transfer between a major head and a minor head. Understand that your IGST output tax liability is say 3 lakhs and electronic cash ledger an amount of tax in CGST, and that is 1 lakh of tax amount in CGST. Say your input tax credit is 0, but now we all know that for the purpose of payment the major head has to be same. We cannot utilize the CGST for the purpose of payment of IGST. So now there's an option which has been given that 1 lakh amount of tax which is there in your CGST can be transferred to IGST, and this has to be done in your electronic cash ledger only. So basically what happens is the amount which is available in your electronic cash ledger, it can be transferred from one major head to another major head. Here what the transfer which we are talking about is say transfer from CGST to IGST, or it can be done from one minor head to another minor head. Now how one minor head to another minor head? Say for example there is liability of CGST interest of say 10,000 and you have amount in CGST tax. तो अभी आप क्या करोगे, वो जो CGST tax amount है आप उसको CGST interest में ट्रांसफ़र करोगे. So यहाँ पे the transfer is between minor heads and not the major heads. The major head is still the same. The amount has been transferred from CGST tax to CGST interest. So please understand, the amount which is available in the electronic cash ledger can be transferred from one major head to another major head, and one minor head to another minor head, wherein the first transfer is happening, that is from one major head to another major head. The minor head will remain the same, that is here in our first example we have transferred from CGST to IGST. So the minor head, that was tax, was the same, but when the transfer is happening from one minor head to another minor head, that is say tax to interest, यहाँ पे the major head was the same. So this is what section 49 subsection 10 talks about. A very small point related to this thing, not a very significant change, but yes, if there's any amount which is transferred from the electronic cash ledger under CGST Act to electronic cash ledger under SDST or UTGST, then the government shall transfer to the state tax account or the union territory tax account an amount equal to the amount which is transferred from the electronic cash ledger. So basically क्या हो रहा है, आप CGST में से SGST या फिर UTGST को ट्रांसफ़र कर रहे हो. So as you all know, CGST is something which belongs to the center and SDST or UTGST is something which belongs to the state or the union territories. So whenever this type of transfer is happening, then the government also shall transfer at the equivalent amount to the state tax account or the union territory tax account. Whatever amount has been transferred from CGST to SGST or UTGST has to be transferred by the government also to the state tax or the union territory tax account. And then there's rule 86, and there's new sub rule 4A which has been inserted into it. So what does this say? It basically talks about refund of tax that has been wrongly paid or in excess by utilizing ITC. So this basically says that when a registered person has claimed refund of any tax which has been wrongly paid or in excess through electronic cash ledger, the refund whichever he gets will be credited to his electronic credit ledger. So refund जब आ रहा है because you've wrongly paid some amount or you have paid some amount in excess by utilization of ITC, then in that situation the amount which is refunded, that amount will be credited to your electronic credit ledger. So these were some miscellaneous changes, and with this we've all covered almost all the important amendments, and I hope you've understood all the amendments. Please take care of all the amendments which we have taken up in earlier videos as well with respect to input tax credit, which are very important from examination point of view. So please do revise and keep practicing everything. All the best for your examination. Thank you. Keep studying, keep revising.